Right then, welcome back to the Snatch Chat podcast. This is episode 9. We are going to go through a Q&A. So I've got a bunch of questions that I've got from my lifters and also from you guys as well, the viewers. So yeah, let's just get straight into it. So question 1, my snatch feels inconsistent week to week. What should I focus on to make my technique more reliable? Okay, so your technique more reliable. This here begs or sort of shows to me that your training stimulus should be consistency. You want to start looking at building consistency at sort of certain percentages. So my snatch feels inconsistent week to week. What percentage is this around? Okay, is this somewhere around that 80%? If so, we need to create a larger working capacity at 80%. So that might start with as singles, and you might run this as an EMOM. Those EMOMs are just looking to sort of hit 80% for 12 singles, okay? And then from there, then you might start to bridge that 10 to 12 minute or 10 to 15 minute EMOM, working between 80 and 85%. From that block there, then you might start to look at doing doubles, building up into triples around that sort of base. Really, what I would look to try and do is you want to be able to hit 85% for snatch triples, okay, sets of 3. That's what I would always tell my lifters, that is the goal that we're looking to sort of do. Once we know that we can hit 85% for triples, we then open up the door for that next block where we're looking to sort of hit doubles up towards that 90% realm. That would then show us that we're in a good position to sort of go for a 1 rep max. So really here, what you've got to do to make your technique more reliable is build a better base at that 80% mark. And I wouldn't look at doing necessarily different variants of the movements. I would just keep it to a standard snatch and really hone in on a cue that forces good behavior. Okay, push hard off the floor, controlling through that movement, whatever or wherever you start to feel your technique is breaking down, that should be the cue for your training. Okay, you don't always need to look at what variations of movements to do. That's what I would do. So question 2, what strength lifts carry over the most to improving my snatch and clean and jerk? So there's 3 things you want to start to look at here. You've got squats, you've got pulls, and you've got presses. Your squats, front squats, back squats would be the 2 primers. I wouldn't necessarily look at overhead squats. I think they're sort of a waste of time, for the most part. They come in every now and again, but I don't necessarily think it's a strength movement you've got to look at. But back squats and front squats, 100%. Front squats obviously carry over a lot more to your clean and jerk. With your front squat as well, you could look at variations of those movements. So the one that I use quite a lot with my lifters is a zombie squat. Dependent on what we're looking to try and fix. So if someone is coming out of a clean and sort of leaning forwards to sort of stand back up, zombie squats are good at sort of priming and strengthening up the mechanics to stand out of a hole, not pushing straight up, but sitting onto the heels and sort of pushing backwards. You've got the weight sat on front of you, so you've got a counterbalance. So you're not going to fall backwards, but it's a good movement to work on positioning. So you've got front squats and back squats. When we talk about pulls, you've got obviously your snatch grip deadlifts, snatch pulls, clean grip deadlifts, clean pulls. They're probably a staple in your program. Other pull variations I'd look at would be a Romanian deadlift. I would potentially keep it to those 3 main hinge pull movements. And then he also mentioned presses as well. So strict press doesn't necessarily carry over to your Olympic lifts, but it does help with overhead stability and overhead strength. Okay, just knowing or just going through that sort of movement pattern. Push presses would also be a good variant to sort of carry over into your clean and jerk or snatches and clean and jerks. Mainly the split jerk as it sort of teaches you, or whether you do a split jerk or whatever jerk you do, a push press teaches you that triple extension, that dip drive and squeezing those legs, and that carries over nicely to your jerk movements. So yeah, squats, pulls, and presses would be the three things that I would look at doing as the sort of the strength-based movements to help improve your Olympic weightlifting. Question 3, how do I know whether a missed lift was caused by bad technique or not being strong enough? How do I know whether a missed lift was caused by bad technique or not being strong enough? So you've got to look at sort of how you failed, okay? If you failed by struggling to stand out the whole of a snatch or a clean, that would potentially show me that that is strength. If you're rounding in the spine and you look like a prawn standing out of the hole of a clean, that would potentially be a bit of both, mainly down to sort of timing. Mainly down to sort of timing, the bar dropping onto you, you're losing your brace, the bar's dropped, I'm then struggling to sort of stand back up. So it all depends on where you're sort of, where or what has caused your missed lift. And obviously that would determine whether it's technique or being, or whether it's strength. Yeah, so strength is obviously if you're struggling to sort of stand back up, struggling to sort of get it off the floor. Predominantly, the main sort of aspects would be down to technique. Again, with technique, I then look at, you've got poor technique, or you've misgrooved and mistimed a lift. So you've cut extension short, the bar hasn't got enough height, you're over pulling the bar's got too much height, it's dropping onto you, or you're losing position. So it all depends on what is causing you to sort of fail there. Question 4, if I can only train 3 to 4 days a week, how should I structure my sessions for best progress? Now, this all depends really on what your goal is and how your sort of training looks. For a general rule of thumb, for a three-day program, you could have snatch focus session, a clean and jerk focus session, and consolidation session. Okay, so snatch is looking at a priming based movement, your main block of snatches. Clean and jerk session would look at a clean and jerk primer and a clean and jerk block, your main block. And then session 3 is, I call it a consolidation, but that is looking at what we're trying to gain from session 1 and session 2. And then session 3 is looking to still do those technical changes, whatever that may be, at a slightly higher percentage and starting to push the boundaries a little bit more. A 4-day split might well be snatch focus, clean and jerk focus, power day, speed day might be block work on session 3, and then session 4 back to sort of consolidation. I'd always look at the third session or fourth session, so third session of a three-day program, fourth session of a 4-day program, as the sort of the heavier day, where you're now starting to push the technical adaptations that you're looking to get from the start of the week, and then starting to progress slightly with the percentage, seeing if you can sort of maintain your technique. But then, yeah, there's loads of different ways, but that's a general rule of thumb, okay? Question 5, should I be doing more full lifts or more drills and variations to improve technique? And again, it all really depends. I think sometimes we get caught up in the fact that we need to do drills, loads of drills and loads of variations. But in reality, if you want to get good at snatches and clean and jerks, you've got to do snatches and clean and jerks. So if you want to get good at snatches and clean and jerks, you've got to do those movements, the snatches and clean and jerks. The variations of the movements is when you're looking to try and hyper focus on a certain aspect of a lift. So if you're losing confidence once you're past the knee, it becomes more of a head game. The weight now feels heavy. I'm losing position. I'm starting to pull the bar. Okay. You would then look at doing block work, reinforcing that sort of section of the lift where you lose confidence, to see if then we can start to build confidence. That's how I would use blocks. For another example, if you're now struggling to get height on the bar, that you're not creating enough force through the center or through the extension, so you're limiting bar height. The bar now is toppling onto you or changing direction, coming back down onto you before you've actually received it. You would then look to start to do power cleans and power snatches, developing power, or trying to increase height on the bar. If you're finding that you're coming up onto your toes a little bit too soon or feeling unstable in the bottom of a snatch or clean, you might start to look at a no feet snatch or a no feet clean. It all depends on what you're looking to try and fix. And again, general rule of thumb, you want to do more snatches and clean and jerks. Only look at doing variants when you've highlighted the area that you're sort of looking to try and fix. So question 6. What are the most common problems you see in the squat position of the snatch and clean, and how can lifters fix them? What are the most common problems you see in the squat position? Okay, so when we talk about the squat position, what you'll probably find is a lot of people are trying to stay super vertical in that receive. Okay, now without going sort of down a rabbit hole, that we are all built slightly different. We've got longer limb lengths. Some people have a shorter torso. Some people have a longer torso. This is all going to impact your squat position. With that being said, not all lifters are going to feel stable in a super vertical torso. When you look at the Chinese weightlifters, they are all fantastic in that bottom position, super vertical, looking strong and stable. For the most part, British people can't hit a position like that. So the one thing that I would try and get you to understand is loading your hips. So when you do your next set of back squats, film your set of back squats. What you'll find is that you track your hips back, load the hips up, push those knees out as you control into that bottom position, because that's going to keep the weight through the center of the foot. You've loaded the hips, so you're not going to find that your hips are going to be shooting back, you lose the bar forwards, or that as you sort of stand up, that you've got that sort of butt wink as you're sort of driving out. Loading the hips up is going to create a better stability driving out of that bottom position. And what you'll probably find is the other areas linked to that, coming up onto your toes, the heels are lifting, all probably reverts back down to that hip position. Have you drove your hips back the same as how you would do in a back squat? Have you loaded up that position so the weight stays through the center of the foot? With that being said, then you'll find that the knock-on effects, another area will be the heels are lifting, and that might well be that you're coming up onto your toes too soon in that extension. But the biggest thing that you'll probably want to look at here would be whether you're loading up your hips. I think a lot of people, probably earlier on in their career or as they're sort of starting in weightlifting, is that they are afraid of feeling anything in their lower back. But feeling tension in your lower back and a stretch on the inner thigh in that bottom position shows me that you found your most stable, strongest, grittiest position where you want to try and receive your snatch and clean. So when you go into your snatch and cleans, you reach extension, you need to find how you can shoot those hips back to find that stable position in the bottom. Hopefully that's made sense. Okay, question 7. Can technique actually improve when lifting heavy? Or should technical work stay light? No, definitely not. I think technical work should be given in stages, okay? Is that you stay at a lighter percentage until you can see that whether you're working at 70, 75%, you stay within that realm until you can see that 75% you're able to make or maintain those technical adaptations. You're then still working on your technique as you now push that to 75 to 85%, okay? You're still working on technique. You're still looking to double down on those positions and make that technical adaptation up until 85%. When you then start to border 85% plus, it's probably not now where you can improve your technique, because it's a little bit heavier. But definitely up until that 85% mark, what you'll probably find is that you can definitely still improve your technique. Okay, improving your technique at 85% is going to give you the confidence and the backing as when you start then to push those heavier weights. Question 8, what are the signs that I'm doing too much even if I still enjoy training? Signs that you're doing too much. Okay. Your training now has plateaued. You're not seeing progress. Weights are feeling heavier than they normally do. You feel tired going into your sessions. You're not finding that you're getting good quality sleep. You're waking up tired. They're 5 things. What are the signs that I'm doing too much? So talking about those 5 things there, flip it on its head. Things that you're doing too. What are the signs that you're doing too much? It's now impacting your lifestyle. Okay, are you still able to maintain the task that you've got to do at work? Are you still able to be? Present in family life? It's not now preventing you doing family things, going to work on time, etc., etc. If it's impacting your lifestyle, that's probably mean that you're doing too much. If you are doing too much, you'll probably then find that the 5 things that I've previously said. Question 9, what do most recreational lifters get wrong about how progress in Olympic lifting really works? What do most recreational lifters get wrong? That we have to constantly look to push the weight, as well as add in as many variants or different variations of those movements. They get warped into thinking more is better when really less is better. Doing snatches and doing clean and jerks, trying to get better at snatches and clean and jerks, you are fine just doing snatches and clean and jerks. You don't need to look at hang movements, block movements, power-based movements. This is all complicating the sport. You don't need to change movements on a weekly basis. You might have the same movements for 6 weeks, looking to slowly progress that percentage up, making sure that you maintain that perfect technique. And I think that is what I would say most recreational lifters get wrong, is they look at doing too many variations and they look to try and push the weight up too soon, rather than sticking at a certain weight and making sure it's moving well and moving better, and they've built confidence lifting that weight before then they start to push that weight up a little bit more. I think we've probably all been there. I've definitely been there when I very first started weightlifting. I used to watch, it was before really Instagram was videos. It was literally square images. That was all Instagram was. So a lot of the stuff that I learned how to lift was from YouTube. It was the likes of watching ATG, or the other sort of like, clock off, things like that really, and watching them do all the different variations. And then you start to get walked in it. Oh, I'm going to do some hang snatches. Look how good he is at hang snatches. Can I mimic that sort of technique? And that's probably another thing as well, mimicking or trying to mimic someone else's technique because it looks good. Okay, I saw someone on Instagram the other day saying when they first started weightlifting, they tried to look like Carlos Nazar. Now, Carlos Nazar is a really good weightlifter. Do not take that away from him. Technically, he's technically not the best weightlifter out there, but the technique works for him. Now, what works for him doesn't mean that if you copy him, it's going to work for you. Okay. Previously, as we've sort of said, we've all got different limb lengths. We've all got different sort of shorter torsos, longer torsos. You need to find what works for you, maintaining good quality movements, because it's an efficient way of lifting. Yeah, that's what I would say there. Question 10: is it better to repeat the same lifts each week? Oh, sorry, I've just said that one. Yeah, and that's the exact areas that I've just said. Sorry about that. Question 11. How often should you actually be testing heavy singles or PB attempts? All right. Again, it all depends on your block of training. It might be a 6-week block, and you're going to test on week 1 and week 6. You might well be within a strength phase and have, and that will be a 5-week block. So strength phase within the middle, you might test in week 3 and week 5. If it's a 4-week block, you might test in week 3 or week 4. It all depends really on the sort of the block of training and what you're looking to sort of push. Generally, it might not be heavy singles. It might well be at the start of your program. I'm not going to be pushing a heavy single because I'm working around 75 to 80% doing triples, but I'm going to go for a triple max, a 3-rep max, and seeing if then I can bridge just a little bit beyond that parameter of 85%. That then shows us then we can push our train up a little bit more. You might have then snatch doubles. You might have one where you go for a working max, a standard week of dropping that percentage back down 5% before looking to sort of push up for another 1-rep max. So it might well be working max, reset week, 1-rep max. It all depends on where you are within your training and what the sole goal is that you're trying to get out of it. Question 12. This is the final question. What's the best way to break through a long plateau in Olympic lifting? Consistency, drilling, percentage work. Okay. So currently I have plateaued at 110 kilo snatch. I hit that June last year. I've not gone above that. So my block of training at the moment, this is the second round or the second cycle at the same sort of percentages. But what I've done here is I've looked to increase my volume hitting these percentages, and I've done 2 cycles of that. So my first cycle, I was working at doubles, working up 80 to 85%. Then I've looked at now going into power-based movements around 75 to 80%, as well as hitting triples at 80 to 85%. I've now hit triples at 85%. So my next block of work now is then going to look to push my work rate from 85 to 90%. I'm bringing that down to singles within the weeks, and I will do that running EMOMs, looking to just, it might be an 8-minute snatch EMOM, every minute on the minute, working from 85 to 90%, seeing if I can push it up, seeing if over the next 4 weeks, I can look at getting more reps in at those higher percentages. And there's different variations of maxes within there. So I'm going to go for a 2-rep max at the end of this week. That should be around that sort of 85 to 87% mark. That's what I'm hoping for, because then I think I've got that confidence to then look to try and knock the door on hitting 87% more often in my next block in the EMOMs before then starting to push towards that 90% plus. Okay. So it's really staggering. You don't need to go high volume strength, peak 1-rep max. You've not hit your 1-rep max and start again. You can have a high volume block, which I did have up until 75%. We've now hit 80%, and then I've got 3 sort of mini strength phases with obviously deloads in between, looking at ramping up my capacity at this 85% mark before then moving into more of a peak for a 1-rep max. And that's what I would do. So this block of training probably will be closer to a 20 to 24 week training block. But really, if you're in a long plateau, if you are currently in the midst of a long plateau, there's no real end point of this cycle. You've got to sort of manage each cycle and your expectations. If you've hit your expectations, you push it up a little bit further. If not, you widen the capacity at where you currently are. So that might well be deload 2 further weeks, slightly adapting certain aspects to try and get the expectation that you wanted to before you move on. That is how I would look at getting over that. I think we get sometimes locked into the fact that weightlifting is a 1 rep max sport, snatch 1 rep max, snatch and clean and jerk. But our training doesn't necessarily need to make a 1 rep max consistently. Our training doesn't need to mean that we only ever hit a 1 rep max. It needs to look at building capacities and stages and certain phases to then hit the 1 rep max where we know we're in a good position to go for a new 1 rep max, heavier than where you were at the previous, before the previous plateau. Hopefully that makes sense. That is the end of episode 9. We are nearly in double digits on this podcast. I can't believe it. When I actually set this podcast up, I thought, I'll keep it going. I'll see how it sort of goes. I've actually really, really enjoyed it. I think I'm quite a good waffler. I don't know how this sort of comes across your end, but I actually really enjoy answering these questions and trying to think of the clearest way to give you the answers. Now, I do this fully off the cuff. I've got no notes on these questions. I don't look at these questions necessarily for, days beforehand. I literally do my check-ins on a Monday, copy and paste all the questions into a Word document. Once my check-ins are done, that's when I then come and set up for the podcast. And then as I'm reading them out, that is when I'm answering the question. And sometimes I think getting a raw answer from a coach on this probably makes a lot more sense than me coming up with these are the bullet points that I'm trying to hit and creating a sort of a script for these questions. Off the cuff, raw, you get my honest opinions. I think it's really, really good. Hopefully you enjoy it as well. If you do enjoy the podcast, why don't you comment below that you're enjoying it? And if you have any questions that you want me to answer in episode 10, that's going to be a big one. Get them in and I'll do that. And if you haven't already, make sure you clicked subscribed. Click subscribe and like this, just so then, we can keep this pushing on. See you in the next one.